Hello and welcome to another episode of the Born Too Late podcast, where I, Jay Castro, and my friend here, Josh Rutledge, talk to musicians, journalists, broadcasters, label owners, or anyone else making a fuss in the world of underground music right now. Our guest this week has been a mainstay in the Vancouver music scene for years now. His band, the Newtown Animals, Tranzmitors, and Fashionism have been major musical influences not only in his hometown, but trickling down into the US as well. Combining influences such as 70s British punk, mod, new wave, and power pop, the Newtown Animals and the Transmitters churned out a sound that was new and exciting, yet somehow familiar. An accomplishment that's easier said than done. These bands breathed a breath of fresh air on a much-needed punk scene that was quickly going stale during the start of the millennium. And between the years 2015 and 2018, Fashionism released a fistful of 7 inches that, to me, solidified their place as one of the best bands of the last 25 years. And not only that, but this is perhaps the first time we've interviewed someone that's been on the cover of MRR. In case you haven't guessed it, this is the Jeffrey Pop episode.
When every day's feeling like a Monday morning, staying out late, kinda gets boring. Do what you wanna when you wanna do something now. I'm getting older by day, younger at night. I need a little something to feel alright. Yeah, do what you wanna when you wanna do something now. Yeah, you do what you wanna when you wanna do something now. Chances are you've made some choices, but I don't hear no inner voice.
You made it.
Look at me. That's so fun. I got to
Hey.
I had to do. There should be like a warning if there's going to be like tech stuff. I mean, like some of us are still living in total Luddite land.
Oh yeah, you should have seen me tell Josh. I'm sitting there going, "Oh no, he's having problems. I don't know what to tell."
Yeah. Well, I like the worst is like I'm pretty good navigating stress, but I'm not good navigating tech stress. It's just like and I realize that this is on me. Just it's almost like you just want to wreck things. So it's just like your go-to. It's just like I can fix things that have like a little bit more of a tangible side to it. It's just like oh yeah, I can sort that out. But when it's just like a computer, it's just like no. And then you just stare at it for a little bit. And then and then it says you need to do this. Then this is what's already downloaded, and I'm like, what's already downloaded? And then it just doesn't open. And then you're like sitting there staring at it, and I'm trying to decide. I'm like, okay, and I'm like, and I've already got like a tea and everything set up, so I was like in a pretty good spot, like pretty pleasant, And
Yeah.
to have like a tech issue is just like, so maybe this will be good. Maybe I'm like a little bit more on edge now, so it's possible that my answers will be a little bit more problematic than if I was like a little bit more chill, because I would have, because like you don't really want me to have like this sort of Zen vibe with all my answers. You'd like it to have a little bit more, I don't know. It doesn't even have to be grit. It has to be just like, a little bit more color, as you were,
a little gravel thrown in there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. We you know what, Jeffrey? We'll take you however you come to us.
Okay, well, I'm here right now, so it's this is how it is. So it's all right.
We definitely appreciate that.
It always works out in the end.
Yeah.
Well, that's not actually true. It doesn't always work out. But it's okay. Like in like the bigger picture of time, like if we were to think of like time and you stretch it out, the longer you stretch it out, you could make the argument that it does work out, because eventually it becomes relative to the length of time, right? So there's a point where it's just like, well, yeah, if you stretch something, then what you're expecting to have work out becomes in relation to that distance and time. So therefore, at that point, you're kind of like, well, yeah, I guess it did work out, because you're not able to quantify the same amount of distance and time. So something that I would want to work out right now in the moment, within like the last 10 minutes of me navigating that computer, what I wanted to have work out at that point was much more specific to what I'd want in, if I were to think about maybe over the course of the week, or maybe the course of the evening, for instance, I do things that I'm going to do after this. So, I want those things to work out, so I could, do they work out? Well, I don't know yet, but I guess I can look at it like that.
The bigger picture, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're allowed, and your pictures can be incremental, right? So it's just like you start with one picture, and then you're just like, oh, that picture is all
Oh
right. And you
gosh, you're
start,
talking about frame and frame type stuff now.
yeah, right. 'Cause at this point now we have to get like a little pad and make one of those little books, you know, life through the example of a flip book and stuff, you know.
I think if we keep going, we're going to solve a lot of the mysteries of the universe.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, like that is fun, isn't it? There's nothing better than like a rock chat that ends with solving some like that ends in philosoph. And all conversation should end up in some philosophical debate, like or at least ideological. Doesn't have to be a philosophical debate because the thing is, you can kind of like work that into every single question. But I mean, like as long as you're sort of bouncing in between various things,
Ah,
that makes it
yeah.
a little bit more fun. Bit of depth, bit of color. Then that was a little bit kind of like that.
Some of the unexpected kind of makes its way in there.
Exactly.
Can you imagine the show notes you're going to be able to write for this, Jay?
I know.
The description of this episode.
Oh yeah, I guess you guys have like your own little format. Hey, is that a John Lucero shirt you're wearing?
Yes, it is actually.
Look at that. I like just saw the top of it and you can recognize it because I think one of the questions, just a second, I've got my notes. Because you sent me things that were going to happen. But one of the questions was like a skateboarding question. And then so that's sort of topical. Like, and I'm just like looking, I'm like, oh, I recognize the top of that image right there. It was like, that's like the first of the series of those John Lucero boards before he when the monster comes out.
Right. Before you get to see the full face.
Yeah, because the first one's just like the bars, and there's the eyes, and then it opens up, and then there's like the last one where he's like all crazy, right?
Yeah. This is Black Label sells these.
Well, isn't John Lucero Black Label though?
Yeah,
right? It's his company, so it's makes sense.
Yeah, but I saw this at a store, and they didn't have my size. And I immediately went, oh my gosh, I got to get one of these. And so I just jumped on the Black Label website and ordered one real quick.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I've managed to hold off of like the collector market for rebuying like old 80s skateboards and stuff, which is just totally insane. I follow a couple like those sort of like those chatter pages, and it's always just exciting to see how. I mean, I skateboarded I think one of the questions, I skateboarded my whole life. Like I didn't actually even stop until like around 2010 when I broke my leg, and I was kind of fucked after that. So it's just like, but I started like in '83 or something, and so like everyone has like, you have like those sort of chunks where like those were the boards that you remember the most,
right?
And it was mostly because there was only like 30 pros back then, so it was just like, or however many there wasn't that many pros.
Yeah.
You remembered every one of those boards, and every time you'd open up a Thrasher and you look at the cheapskate ad, and there'd be like that string of like, it'd be like that row of boards, and you'd sit there with your friends and you'd be like, I want to have that one, and then you'd come up with your perfect setup, and you'd like, and and like one of those John Lucero boards was for sure in there because that was Schmidt sticks, I guess, back then. But I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, Thrasher magazine. I mean, like you said, there's you see the same skateboarders in those magazines, the same decks, and when somebody came out with a new model, it was like a big deal. This new Jeff Kendall or whatever.
Yeah, but especially when they like, because you were so just like, it was so drilled into your head, like you're just like, because it wasn't like it. You just because there was only one source to get it too. You went to your local shop and then you checked out the boards, and then you had like, I mean, when did Transworld start, I guess, but I mean, it was only Thrasher for many years. Like that was like the only magazine you could get, and then and then the two magazines really, and then that was it. Like there was no other. I mean, you get the videos that came out once a year or whatever, but I mean, but beyond that, it was like, so you were just like, it was like those were like little gold, right?
Oh yeah,
almost like getting an MRR, like like that was like your other kind of like, the way you got everything was through those skate magazines, and then through like either a Flip Side or a Maxim Rock and Roll. Like, I mean, like, I mean, at least for me, I mean, like I didn't grow up in Vancouver. I grew up in like a smaller town, which is just in the interior of BC, and so you didn't have the luxury of like a punk store, like a record store like that. You had the skateboard shop, so that was like, or the comic shop actually. We had a comic store that was really. The dude who ran the comic store was like pretty into just weird things or whatever. And so
Wow.
he would have all sorts of fun punk stuff there too. So that's how you kind of got everything too.
Oh gosh, you're so like, Phoenix, where I'm at, is a big town, but it kind of isn't because it's just so out of touch. At least it was like in the 80s and 90s. It might as well have been a small town. And yeah, we had gosh, from what I remember, it was a couple of skate shops here, handful of comic book stores. But yeah, same thing. I got a lot of my musical, knowledge from Notes from the Underground and
Oh yeah,
Thrasher.
that was it.
Yeah.
I got so much of it came from. I remember getting like one of the first. This is my brother and I. We got one of our first subscriptions. I don't know what year this would have been, but it came with the Thrasher Skate Rock Volume 1.
Oh, cool.
And then like the year before that, was it the year? It was the year that we got that one, and then the next subscription, it was how like, did you have it where you could choose like they had like you got your subscription, but they had like kind of combo platters with labels, and they had this deal with SST at the time, and so you could pick you could pick a cassette to come with your subscription, and so I got a cassette of Black Flag My War. And then I got that Thrasher Skate Rock Volume 1, and that was like, I don't know what year that was. It was before 86 because I remember having those things before going to Expo 86 to watch that contest. So it must have been 85. That
wow.
So like that Black Flag record was already a couple years old, which is probably why SST was trying to unload them.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, and you don't know anything about any of those bands, right? Because you didn't see them. Like they never,
right. They're just mystery,
Yeah, I mean, like they were still happening at that point, but I mean, like they didn't come to Kamloops. That was the name of the town where I grew up. It's like a couple hours away from, but Kamloops is smaller than Phoenix. Like it was like 100,000 people at tops. It's like,
oh yeah, that's way smaller.
Yeah, it's way smaller, but it had like an epic skateboard scene, like really early on. So it was like, and it must have been lopsided compared to like if you were to do like some kind of demographic of like how many people should be into this if you have this many people there. It was like really lopsided because like you would have like the SNFU was like the local was the band that would play there all the time. There was like some local bands. There was a local band called Desperate Minds that was playing around, and they were like and they were quite a bit older than me. Like they were like, because we were like kids, but you'd still go to those shows. And but SNFU would come quite a bit, and so you'd go see them. And that was like, and they were like, and so we were so lucky because they were like that was like the top skate rock band back then, too. Like I think they got skateboard band of the year a couple times in Thrasher in the later 80s. So it's just to have them as like your like regular go-to band was like. I mean, everyone. If you're in California, you had tons of bands too. But I mean, like we were pretty lucky for like a small town to have like DOA would come and SNFU would come from Alberta. I think SNFU was still in Alberta. They were from Edmonton still at that point. So between those bands, they would come back and forth. No Means No as well and stuff. And so you had like that.
Oh man,
those are amazing bands to
yeah.
coming through. And because of it, you had like a really big scene. That was happening, and so like crazy shows happened. Like Jawbreaker played there. That was later. That must have been like 91 because it was on the Unfun tour. But like All played there. And the Doughboys would come to town. The Asexuals and like that kind of era, like that kind of timeline and stuff. It was wild.
That's definitely a lot more than what was going on here.
It was just because it was straight up skateboarding because the skateboard scene was so big that it like it had enough people that would generate like a sort of a punk scene that would go to the shows. And so you'd go to SNFU shows and there'd be 500 people there at least, and that's like in like a small town. So those were big shows, and they were totally off the hook. There was like this. There was like an indoor park there called Ollie's. This is like the late 80s. And they used to, and it was the park was crazy to skate. It had like the one side had like a like this mini ramp, and the mini ramp was kind of like a shit version of like the mini chin ramp, which was like there was the chin ramp from the video, right, from the Animal Chin video. But then in the Richmond Skate Ranch, which was like a skate park in Vancouver or in Richmond, I guess. But I mean, they built this thing called the mini chin, which was like this fun, like this super cool mini ramp that you could skate. And then this budget version of that was in camera. but the cool thing about it though was they had this indoor pool or bowl, and it was super deep, like way too deep, like for like, and it was before nobody really knew how to make it, so it was super harsh to skate, and it had way too much vert. But they would have bands play on the mini ramp, and then this sort of crazy pit would happen in this bowl, and it was like a true death trap because you jump in and that was it, you were dead. Like, you couldn't get out until the song was over. Like there was no way out, and so people would try and like the thing would turn into like a mixing bowl, right? And the only way to get in was you had to stage dive into it. And you just like, and you're like, it's just like this leap of faith and hope to die. And like it was wild. COC played there like on the Technotrocity, or is that was the name of that record? Is that Technocrass? What was the name of that record? That COC record with the oil drums. Anyways, doesn't matter. It was like that tour. It was that tour, and they played there at that tour, and it's mental. It's just like, total like crossover crazy.
Before we start officially, I just want to ask you real quick: did you catch that Tony Hawk documentary?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm gonna watch it. I was like, I actually have it like on my like if like behind me there's a screen.
Oh yeah.
But I'm in the way of it, and I've got it set aside like marked. So there's like my technical moment. Like so I'm tech savvy enough to like have that like on my like list to like watch this.
That's all one really needs is just create,
like,
the little playlist, and you're good.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. I've met Tony Hawk a few times. A bunch of years ago, like it was like I don't know what year it was. We had this joke gang. This is like the mid '90s, called the Lasso Posse, and like it was a joke, and it was just like and basically we just like kind of like, and we were like sort of like all straight edge at the time, and I still am, but I mean like everyone, and so we used to like think that it was funny to like tie up drunks onto trees and shit, and like kind of fuck them up, and then like and we like but Birdhouse was on tour, and they were like coming, and this is like the dark ages of skateboarding too. Like skateboarding's fully illegal at that point everywhere you go, and the whole industry is falling out, and so like, and this is way before like X Games or any of the video games, right? So like in retrospect, at the time you don't really think on those terms because we were like, I don't know how old we were, but I mean like you're not really thinking in terms of like what am I trying to say? Like you just see them as famous people. Like it was like, oh, it's Tony Hawk. Like like and because skateboarding is your whole world, you that's enough. Like just like that's like a top person within the world. That's your top person. You don't think you're not really sort of equating to the fact that he's just like he's only a few years older than me, but he's just enough older that like that's like his career. Like I skateboarded, but I didn't get anything from it. Like I mean, like other than it ruled. But I mean, like I didn't like it wasn't my career. I certainly was never in that kind of situation, right? So they were. Anyways, the point of this is they came and did this demo, and we sort of kidnapped him. Like we lured him into like that. We had this band held around the thing, and then we kind of like lured him around the corner. I lured him around the corner, and we're like, Tony, come here, and he like followed us, and then he comes around the corner and is like, what? And we had like this like a volleyball net or something, and then we got him and like wrapped him up in this volleyball net, gave him a few shots and shit, and then like threw him in this, and then we stole him, and it was hilarious, I guess. Like maybe it was kind of like fucked up from his perspective.
So immediately, immediately after you accosted Tony Hawk, how did that end? As far as like, so you finally let him out of the net.
I don't even remember. I just remember it was hilarious. There was like it just was like such a blur of chaos, right? You're just like, this is a great, you just like, you come up with a plan. There's no plan. It's just like, yeah, this is a good idea. Okay. And then you just do it. And then it's happened. and then it's just like, oh shit. and then I think the idea was that the demo was kind of winding down, and then we ended up just kind of like going to. I just remember we got, and I think it was like Willie Santos or someone. We got some of them to take us. We went to a movie with them though afterwards. So however that all transpired, it ended in going like, anyways, as sort of like hanging out with them, and then just kind of whatever. It was, and it's fun, like
good sport, man.
Yeah, they were rad. I mean, like, he was up for it, I guess. It's just like,
wow. Well, Josh, you ready?
I am absolutely ready. So now we'll launch into the official.
oh man, like, how official does it need to be? I mean, like, we can have, I mean, like, you can, anything that's been said, like, I mean, I guess because I'm here, I've sort of said, yeah, you can do whatever you want with it.
We got
so,
some, some golden nuggets here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm
essentially you're kind of already off to a start, so you can, like, you doesn't have to have a hard start. Let's just say like that.
Yeah.
This is like a soft opening for this interview.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I like
that way it doesn't have to have that same kind of intro. It's like a prologue or like the pre, when you're reading a book and it has like way more than you're expecting. You're just like, why did you give me that much? Like, I'm already in the first chapter and I just read like 20 pages.
I know the whole book already.
Did I need this much sort of like build up just to get me on board? Like, come on. Like if why didn't you just make it a chapter and then just kind of have it be like the prequel to the book or something like that? Or like, it just seems like it seems like it's more complicated than it needs to be. You can just be like, yeah, this is easing in.
Yeah.
But you guys decide how you want to go with that. Like this.
Well, Jay is very creative with his editing skills, so he will make it work.
Why I'm suddenly in the darkness? It was sunny out, and now it's
It's gonna be nice though. It's gonna give you like kind of a shady kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, I noticed that it's so much. You're so much darker tonight. It's very mysterious.
Yeah. Well, it was so sunny outside. I opened the window and there was plenty of light, but now I feel like I'm trying to create some sort of ambiance.
Well, I mean, if you want this interview to be darker, I mean, I can go that way. It's all a matter of like framing your questions in such a manner that it forces me into a corner so that my answers go the way they go.
Maybe into like a melancholy kind of.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see,
dude.
I'm all right now, but I mean, like, things can turn quickly. One runaway story, and the next thing you know, it's no more shits and giggles.
Yeah, so Jeffrey, when Jay was reading the intro, he was talking about your legendary status in the Vancouver punk scene. So I thought we could kind of take it all back to maybe the Jeffrey origin story.
Oh.
So how did you first become interested in punk music, and what was it that really drew you to it?
Well, we sort of almost went over it. It's like, I mean, skateboarding for sure was like sort of the mainstay. Everything sort of stemmed from that. And like that was it, and it was almost just like it just came with skateboarding at that point. We started skateboarding really young, and we were like kids. I guess I started skateboarding like in '83, and then so you just started reading those magazines, and I really kind of was like, yeah, I'm into it by like '85, I guess, and I kind of used like when I bought like a pro board as like, oh yeah, I'm in, and then like at that point, like you just like the music just kind of came with it. And so it was just like, and at the time, like, this is like, if that's like at 85, like everything was skateboarding was just punk at that point. But it was like, it was awesome though, because you also had like everything from like the Big Boys and but even like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Beastie Boys. And it's just like, skateboarding was so much more. It had like, there was so many elements of so many things that it was pulling from. So kind of gave you everything was kind of a go really early on. I mean, you do gravitate to the stuff that you really love, obviously, but I mean, like, you're just like, that was like the introduction to so many things. And I mean, like, and there was, I mean, beyond those tapes that I mentioned earlier, like that Thrasher Skate Rock and that first Black Flag tape, those early videos were huge for like, kind of like how I got introduced to stuff. Like, I mean, those Santa Cruz videos, like hearing the Descendants for the first time was definitely on those videos. And Fire Hose, that Brave Captain song, was like totally mind blowing. And what other stuff would have been just like, oh, it was such a there was actually a contest video from Del Mar. I think it was an 86 contest was when the contest, and my favorite band of all time I heard from that video, and it was like because my favorite band of all time is the Toy Dolls, and there was like in that video there was a song called James Bond Lives Down Our Street, which just actually came out that year, but it was on that video and someone was skating to it, and I was, this is, what am I hearing? It was like just mind blowing, and I just remember just like that I couldn't even like deal with it. And so it was like, I remember recording it off of this tape, and it was so shit. Like you couldn't even hear it because it had the skating in the background, and the announcers like, oh, and it was a hard cut edit, so you didn't even have the whole song. It was so terrible. But it was just like, and I remember, and I heard the Cult was played a lot on that same video. That would have been like Cult Love, like that album would have came out of that. Which kind of led me into like who my favorite skateboarder at the time was. I think, which is one of the questions, which was Kevin Staub. And it was because he had that Mad Scientist board.
Yeah, the Sims.
The Sims Mad. Because my first board ever actually was a Sims Screamer. And then like that was my first board that I bought. But then like there was the Mad Scientist board. And he was like, but he would, and I remember that there was those ads with him with the Cult.
Yeah.
And you know, he had his long epic hair and stuff like that. And anyways, but for sure, like those early videos was just like such an introduction into all that just all of it. And it was wild because you almost got introduced to so many different bands that sounded different all at the same time. Because the skateboarders, it was like all it was the individuals of each one of these dudes, and then it was like, and each company had its own vibe to it. Like, you know, like there was like the companies that were way more hardcore, and so because of it, you'd hear like these more hardcore bands, and you got into it. And then there was the bands that were like, and and all those skate rock records specifically. I mean, like I loved all that stuff. For sure. Like all those early bands, like the Faction, especially.
Right.
You know,
JFA.
JFA. My neighbor had a JFA board, and it was the worst board ever to ride. It was impossible. It was the green Paisley JFA, and it was just big. It was impossible. It was so huge and so flat. It just was like, it sucked. But I mean, like I like that. Those first couple JFA records are fantastic. Actually, I like a bunch of their records. I like that weird one with like the green flies on the cover and stuff, Into the Nowhere or something like that. I've got it. I can go grab it and we can look at it. But it's like,
oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look behind you, like it's like you can just see walls of records. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
So they're in there somewhere.
Well, I wanted to also ask you, to me, not just listening to some of these songs when I was a kid, but actually going to gigs was a big influence for me. And I wanted to ask you, you remember what some of the gigs were that you attended that had an impact on you? I know you talked about SNFU, but
like what were I mean, my first show ever was actually Billy Idol and Platinum Blonde. Which was we were like little kids, and that was like kind of a stadium tour. But that didn't even blow my mind because I was too young to care. I just remember like, yeah, I'm at this show, and it was just like, and it was really funny, right? But like those early shows were like those SNFU shows were totally like they were almost sort of scary. Because you're like, I wasn't, and I'm not like a particular, you can't tell because it's like a screen, but I'm not a particularly huge human. So, I mean, like, and I haven't actually, I was not larger in the 1980s when so going to those shows, you're just like, and that was like the first time you sort of see that kind of like that kind of wildness, and you're just like,
yeah.
And so it was just like, I just remember being like, this is so wild. This is so crazy. And just like, and it just seemed otherworldly at the time, but you're just so into it, and so you just get obliterated because you just don't know any better, and you're just okay. I'm go into it. And some of those times you used to be able to skate into those mosh pits, right? And you used to and they used to have like jump ramps and stuff set up.
Oh no, that never had anything when I was young like that here.
Yeah,
that's cool.
They used to have the shows at this roller rink out and there would be like jump ramps set out in the things, and so the skateboarding and the music really intertwined, and the local bands. I mean, like the first couple shows that I went, like seeing that band Desperate Minds was like when I was a little kid, and those the two brothers from that band were really great for me, Gary and Tim Chiba. And Tim went on to be in like other bands with, actually he was like in the Wongs and stuff, which was like after SNFU broke up the first time, he was like, anyways, but they like because they were really like, they kind of like just let me come into it, you know. We were like little kids, and so like we are not little kids, but we were like kids, or we were pretty young, and they just were like, and they were older than us and fully just like, yeah, come in. And they and then this fellow Todd Armitage, and he was starting to promote shows, and then he would just let us, like me and a few of my friends, and we would like get to put up all the posters for shows, and then he would just let us into the shows for free. And so we were like his poster guys, because we would just go skating around the city and just put up posters. And then that was like kind of like, so really early on we got sort of like really welcomed into that sort of scene, and then it just never stopped.
Yeah,
basically. And that was really young. That was like I mean, like, you know, like I was by the time I was in junior high, we were starting to help put on some of those shows and poster for some of those shows and stuff.
Wow.
We weren't putting on the shows, don't get me wrong. We were just like the kids who were putting posters and stuff. But it was like you instantly thought, oh yeah, we can do this. We can put on shows. We can start bands. Like it just didn't seem that weird. And so you just do that. And then so like once we kind of got a little bit older, me and some group of friends, we just started putting on the shows. And, you know, and so by the early 90s, we were like helping put on the shows, and by like by earlier mid 90s, I was in bands and we were playing shows and touring and stuff.
Wow. That's such a healthy, I mean, I don't mean to sound like cliche, but that's such a healthy scene, you know, to help each other out and to, you know, welcome, you know, younger kids into it. Because it seems like around here when that people just tell me to, you know, fuck off.
Well, it was all ages shows, right? So it was like, it's not like now where it's like everything's a bar show now.
Right.
And so, and bar shows right away, like just from the nature of a bar show, like if you're in the States, I guess it's 21, here it's like 19, or, you know, and so right away you just like have like this gap, and it's just like, and so there's like a certain sort of energy that comes, like, I mean, you can have that energy for your whole life. I fully watched that, like, Another State of Mind movie, and like was just like, yeah, youth is an attitude, not an age. And that, but that fully like drilled into my head, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Like, I'm all about that vibe. I'm gonna run with that. But it's like, it's such a simple concept, but there's a truth in it, and so like part of that is that crossover in that like that next generation always is bringing up that next generation, and so because of it, you keep that energy going. And I mean, like, I do appreciate that, like, that years ago when that was happening, especially in North America, you had like an age out with music just in general, where it's like, I mean, because you guys are going to be the same age, so you remember when, like, right now it's like sort of an exciting time. You can, like, I'm like way too old to be like, I'm not, but I mean, that's just it. It's just like the people who are playing in some of my favorite bands are not kids. Whereas, like, when I was like if you look back into the 90s, like the people who were playing in the bands that you loved were younger. Like everybody was younger. Like, I mean, just for some context, like, I mean, like when I remember buying this Sex Pistol t-shirt that was like that. It was like that shirt that was like 10 years since the Sex Pistols started or something like that, or broke up or whatever it was. And it was that picture of Johnny Lydon, you know, but that was only 10 years. So that's like, and when you start thinking, you know, when we're watching, like, oh yeah, like check your head just came out, and it was 30 years ago. Like I noticed that happened recently, and it's just like, so like that sort of context of time, and like, and now you see like multi-generations of people giving weight to these bands, like everything. You didn't really have that. You really had like a cutoff, where it was just like, because it wasn't like we were like sitting in the 80s going, yeah, let's have 60s nostalgia, even though that was only 20 years, you know?
Right.
And so when you think, oh, now it's like 30 years since Beastie Boys, and everybody treats that band like they're like the greatest thing ever, and they are great. Like, they're not saying they're not, but I mean, like, but think of if you were to think back in the 80s, thinking of 30 years ago, it's just like, fuck off, 50s. You know, like, I mean,
Yeah.
you had zero time for like that shit. Like, I mean, so everything was still very much pushing in a direction. And then kind of like by 2000, you sort of saw that flip happen. And there's a term for it too, where we've seen like the space-time compression or whatever had overlapped itself, and we'd expanded to such a point where we started like going backwards, you know, where and I can't remember what it's called, but it doesn't matter.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I think that's true though, because you think 20 years ago just seems like yesterday. Like, it's the same era.
Yeah, like,
we've been in the same decade for 20 years.
And fair enough, like 20 years. I mean, like, your relationship to time is always going to be your relationship to time. So I mean, like, as you get older, we do know that as you get a little bit older, sort of, because you switch into increments, like, you know, like, oh, okay, I'm like a teenager, oh, I'm 16, oh, I'm 18, like those increments are much shorter, where you have like these pinnacle moments where we actually see the human condition moving in chunks, and then you're like, oh, in my early 20s, and then 30 becomes a significant time, and then the entire chunk of the 30s just becomes sort of like a place that you're in, and then 40 is significant, and then after, you know, like, so we switch into sort of decades once we reach a certain point. So it'd be curious to know, like, if you were to talk to someone who's 20 right now, how they're actually seeing that sort of relationship to time, because they still might be seeing it with that sort of context, but we're seeing it now because we're now part of the cycle where we see things within decades. And so, like, our relationship to things is in those sort of like bigger time increments. And so being able to sort of distance yourself from thinking like that would be quite, I don't even know if it's possible, because the thing is, because you're existing only within the time that you're existing. So your ability to separate yourself from your own existence would be, well, problematic, obviously, unless you're in the Matrix or something, you know. And, you know, so, but you're right. Like, I do think, like, if I think, oh yeah, like the Hives or the Strokes or like that sort of, then when you think of like that last really great wave of rock and roll bands, and like Jet and all those sort of like that second wave of Britpop with like the Libertines and all that kind of thing. And that was all coming out in the early 2000s. And that's in the Future Heads, I guess. And when you think of like that string of bands, that doesn't seem like that was a long time ago. That feels like, oh yeah, that just happened. Like, those, if you were making a mixtape, you'd be like, oh yeah, those are, but that's 20 years ago. But if you were to put yourself back and be making a mixtape, and you're in the 1980s and you're putting records from 20 years prior, then you're suddenly making records that are from the 60s. So it's just like, and we definitely would not, you don't see bands from, like, we fully treat those bands like something separate, you know, like as a movement, a musical movement in time. Anyway.
So on the topic of 20 years ago, or maybe a little more than 20 years ago.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about New Town Animals.
All right.
And you started this band in the late 90s. And it kind of seems, maybe just from my perspective now, that you were kind of at the forefront of like a movement in music, that whole Pacific Northwest punk power pop thing, that it kind of exploded. So I don't know if I can get you to take credit for altering the course of modern punk music, but I think you were definitely onto something with New Town Animals. So did you have any notion at that time that bands similar to yours were destined for big things?
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to claim that. That's a bit much. But I mean, like, and the New Town Animals, like Nick and Steve started that band, and then like Alex and I joined and stuff. But when the band really kind of came to its own was when all of us were in it. And there was a few other bands. There was other bands that were happening at the same time that were great. And it was like especially down the West Coast. Like, I mean, like, there was other stuff that was going on, like in the East Coast. But as far as like that string of West Coast, that sort of the bubbling of Dirt Nap, I guess, at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was awesome. And the Briefs, without a question, were the standout band. Like for me at least. I remember like because I was actually working at Singles Going Steady at the time. There was a Singles Going Steady in Seattle, and then there was like the Singles Going Steady in Vancouver. And so and which was like a sort of like the main sort of like, you know, well, Fallout Records is great too, but I mean like but there was Singles was like a really great store in Seattle at that time. And so the briefs were, I heard that a demo tape before that first Weird single came out. I remember Pete coming up and he's like, man, you got to hear this tape. It's going to blow your mind. And it was like, and really, I mean, like, it was fun because it was like, there wasn't a ton of bands that kind of made that link between like where the direction that pop punk ended up going, and then that sort of place where there was this kind of throwback to more of like a 70s oriented band.
Yeah.
And there was just a string of bands that all kind of sort of went, yeah, we want to do that at the same time. And it just happened. It wasn't, and it's not like, it wasn't like there wasn't bands that kind of filled that gap. Like Moral Crux were always happening, and they kind of sit in that weird space too, where they kind of started a little bit later in the 80s, and they were putting out pretty great kind of 70s influenced records all through the 90s. But they kind of like, and they were there. I love that band, but I mean, they definitely felt like they didn't feel like they were part of that same sound. Like the riffs, maybe a little bit, like in that there was all those bands, because there was a couple camps happening. There was like that throwaway Johnny Thunders stuff, like that, like disposable rock and roll, which was awesome. Like, you know, and it was just like a sea of Marshall and Gibson, you know. And there was a whole string of bands that kind of had that vibe. And Vancouver obviously had the Black Halos, which were like one of the bigger bands to come out of that scene. But there's all that junk record stuff. And then and then you had like the Dirt Nap scene, which was like this sort of throwback to, I don't know, like new wavy, more 70s punk kind of thing. And the Briefs were the band, I would say, that like kind of like really nailed it, even though they were kind of, they ended up being more skate rock than anything. I mean, like that you definitely hear like more of like an Angry Simones or Agent Orange in some of their songwriting as well. But I mean, like, but they really kind of like those kind of what, just before they got signed to that major label for a short period of time, they like had like, they were on it. They were the kings of the castle. At least for me, they were. It was like every single they put out was just gold.
Yeah.
And the Newtown Animals, that band was a ton of fun, and it was a pure train wreck of a band. But I mean, like, in the sense that it was like so much fun, and it was a hardworking band. We toured a lot, you know, not as much in the States, but in Canada, and like, and those are huge tours, right? Like touring across Canada.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine.
You know, like when someone says, "Yeah, we did a cross Canada tour," that means that you went on tour for over a month, like just to do that tour. Like, so is, you know. I mean, I'd already done big tours like that because I was like the touring bass player in the Smugglers, sort of in the tail end of that time. So I got to do all those sort of big Lookout tours when they were touring like that Rosie record. So that was kind of just before the Newtown Animals. But those were epic tours too. That was like with the Pansy Division and the big tours.
Oh man, I can imagine.
Yeah, big tours with the Donnas, like a North American tour of the Donnas. Which
geez.
So those were big shows, and that was like when Skin Tight came out. So that was like when they were just breaking, right? Like, sort of like, and so those were all pretty wild. But the Newtown Animals and the Briefs and that all those, like the Epoxies, were really cool. And then all those bands from Portland were amazing too. You know, of course, then Exploding Hearts came out, and they were like something really special. But I mean, like, I don't know. There was like a really great vibe, but at the same time, like, you also had like, it was such a crazy cool time because you also had like that Estrus scene going on, which was like awesome. Right. And then you also had the Rip-Off record scene with all those sort of like all that kind of stuff, which was, and all of it I loved. I mean, like, all those bands were so good. I mean, like, I guess some of the Rip-Off stuff was a bit earlier. The Mummies and all that kind of territory was a little bit earlier in the 90s, and they're kind of going through the 90s. But I mean, like, that point when Estrus and all those Bumper Shoot big tours, those big festivals were happening down in Bellingham and things, and you know, there was like a bunch of really cool sort of movements happening at the same time that were all kind of like paralleling each other.
Yeah, I mean, Josh and I talk about this quite often about how we felt really lucky to have been around in that time. I mean, you just put it, you know, you just explained it very well, but Yeah, so much. I mean, will it ever, will that heyday, something like that ever come about again? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, like there's always it always goes in cycles, but it always looks different, and so and it's always
Yeah.
gonna. It also has to do with like where are you at when it happens. I mean,
Yeah.
like so I was exactly of the age for that movement to been the way it was. But I mean, like the thing is, it's just like I was too young to fully appreciate certain aspects of the '80s. I certainly was too young to appreciate the '70s, even though, and so like, but those cycles, like I mean, when people get nostalgic and say, then that's cool. There's 1,000 records that you don't own, so go
Right.
find those records and you're set. But I mean, like if you are always looking, you're always going to find it. Like there's like right now in Canada, there's like so many good
Oh
bands
yeah.
happening right now. It's just totally crazy. And it's like, like there's almost like this revival hardcore scene that's happening here with all these bands that are so good and there's so much energy. So it's just like, I don't know. So it just depends on whether you're in the spot to be able to see it. But that point in the '90s, I was exactly where I needed to be. And I was just so in. So it was like, so because of it, you're just like going to, how many shows did I see?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I still go to shows. I'm going to a show after I finish talking with you guys. But I mean, like, there's, like how many shows did you see at that time? It just seemed like every weekend you're seeing what was now legendary records. That is exciting. Maybe that was like a moment that was like where you're just like, oh wow, that was a lot of good records in a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, if good shows rolled through here, there was something going on. I mean, yeah, I mean, Teen Generate played here, the Makers, the
Yeah.
Drags, I mean,
Oh yeah, I played with all those bands. I didn't play with Teen Generate. I did see them though. Played a few shows with the Makers though. They were awesome. That sexuality,
Psychopathia Sexualis.
sexopathia.
Yeah.
I love that record. That was like such a perfect hybrid album for me. It was like it like had all the elements of Hunger and like it still had like that. But then they recorded this kind of slick, glammy sounding record, and in it, it's a great record to DJ because it's like. My biggest sort of like Teen Generate, like I mean, they're one of the craziest live shows to see. None of their records really captured. None of those records really do justice to how good that band was because they just sound like shit. I want to go see a band and have it sound, and I want there to be blood and guts on the dance floor, and then I want to go home and listen to the record and have it sound awesome so that I can potentially DJ it and play it and put it up against Nevermind the Bullocks and be like, oh yeah, this record rules. Do what you can to make it sound timeless so that you've left timeless records, because the thing is, as soon as that moment in time has passed, all that's left, like there's only so long that people will that sort of like, oh yeah, they were a great live band. Oh yeah, they were a great live band. It's kind of like the idea that you only live as long, your memory is only as long as the last person who dies remembers you. That kind of concept, So like the last person who truly remembers, like can feel the sweat from seeing you live. Well, it's just like once that is lost, all that you have is that document. And if the document doesn't really do justice to how good you were as a band, then how good were you really as a band? Like, like it's like, it just becomes like it becomes like those rock and roll mythology and things, but is it real? Is it real beyond the fact that you didn't actually leave something for us to know? And so, that there comes a point where those stories get lost, and it is fun, because it's like a tale. But I mean, like, Teen Generate are the ultimate example of that for me because they were so good. They were just that good.
So, Jeffrey, I wanted to ask you about Coffee, Tea, and Me, the album you put out in 2015 on La Di Da Records. So, can you tell me a little bit about how this record came to be, and were all of those songs on that record, are they songs that you had written from like years ago, or are they
No,
new?
It was totally the opposite, actually. It's like most of those songs were written day of or within the day. So the deal with that is my friend, this friend Felix, he was like doing he was like building up this new studio, and I just happened to be in this point in time where I had like this time. So we were like, we're trying stuff out, and so we had like this. We should just get together, and I'll just like I'll basically come up with like the arrangement of a song and the general idea for the singing, and I'll try and have the lyrics so I'm not sitting there writing lyrics, and because that sucks. And then, but we'll just make up this like basically I'll play everything, but then we'll just make the song up on the spot. So it's just kind of like, oh, this song should be faster. Oh no, we should make the song like super mellow and just have pianos and stuff on it, and and then we just wanted to try all those weird tricks that you read about, like Beach Boys tricks and all those things that you read about how you do weird studio stuff. We're just like, let's just do that in that thing. There was so many songs we recorded for that thing and it was just like, I just go in and be like, okay, this is the song. And then we'd like work on it and sometimes maybe finish it the next day. But at least half of those songs were like, that was it. They were done in that day. And we mixed it at the end of the day. And that was it. We just didn't go back to it. Like, it was like,
wow.
So, I mean, you can hear that some of it is like weird, right? Some of it's just like super minimalistic. And I mean, I was listening to a lot of like that sort of Mickey Most era Donovan and that sort of Village Green era Kinks and like those sort of, that sort of whimsical kind of like English storytelling. So I don't know if any of those songs really sound like that. They don't, but I mean but that was definitely kind of like the vibe at times. We're just like, we're sitting around. That was a lot of the records that were getting spun.
It's interesting. I mean, I may be totally off here, but when I hear that record, sometimes I hear Pogues.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like, because the thing is, it's just stripped down pop songs, right? There's no tin whistles and some of the instrumentation on a Pogues record.
And it's not necessarily like you're saying, like, oh, maybe even like the storytelling aspect.
Yeah, and Billy Bragg I was listening to a lot at the time too, and like that, his sort of like that kind of vibe, and it was just, and I also kind of like, I sort of like, when I'm not sure, like a character like Paul Weller, where you kind of go through phases with him, and I kind of find like part of what makes him has allowed him to kind of have the kind of career that he's had, is that you can go back and you can sort of discover more in his sort of lyrics and in his songwriting after the fact. Like, I mean, like, yeah, you can absolutely just listen to like a Modern World or one of those kind of like in your face kind of punker kind of tunes and just be like, yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's just pure urgency. And it's just like all like what you kind of want. But then there's a reason why All Mod Cons are one of those sort of like some of those later records that you start to realize, oh, wow, there's so much more to it. And then then when you go through like his bigger career, I mean, like, you start to hear, oh, there's so much to it, which ends up being like a lot of fun. And so, he's ended up being like sort of a big influence, obviously, for me, just not necessarily because you're trying to sound like him or even like write songs like him, but just the idea that anything goes, like not allowing those kind of limiters to come in, at least sonic limiters. You still write songs the way you write songs, but I mean, like, and if you, but it's almost like not saying no to like the idea, oh yeah, you could totally do that. You can take a song and you could play it like a Ramones song, or you could take it and strip it down and play it totally different, and it's the same song. And it, like, as long as the arrangement is strong and the bass of that song is still great, or the melody or whatever, or just the delivery is great, it's fantastic. And so like that was kind of the idea of that Just Jeffrey record, was just like totally just allow songs to go that way, like show up, because you'd write a song sometimes just like really just like a stripped down power chord song, but you wouldn't even have a guitar on it, or you wouldn't even play anything that was actually it was written on, like that sort of just the arrangement was what you kept, but the rest of it was just like anything goes. So it was a very fun record to make because it really felt like you could just do anything.
Well, it's very fun to listen to. I mean, that's a record I love putting on, and I'll listen to it from start to finish.
Cool. Yeah.
That's
exciting because it's like, it's a weird record. Like, I totally get if people are like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, cause it's like, cause it's like, it certainly is different than some of the other records. It's not a rock and roll or a punky record at all. Right. It has elements of it for sure. But I mean, like, there's just as much times where I'm like, oh, like, I want there to be like this Four Seasons sort of moment, where you can do like this sort of like those kind of harmonies or that kind of thing, which I cannot sing like Frankie Valli, just for the record. But I mean, and he is like one of my top people. Like I love the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
But just like the way that they arrange their songs are super, it's very, very smart songwriting. And it's a lot of fun.
And that's going to do it for part 1 of our Jeffrey Pop episodes. Tune in next week when we conclude our chat with Jeffrey. We talk about fashionism. We talk about what the Tranzmitors have been up to recently and all sorts of super fun stuff. Jeffrey's a great dude, great guy, great guest. A lot of fun in this in this talk we had in these episodes. And so we'd like to thank him, of course, for taking the time, sitting down, chatting with us. And we'd like to thank you, the listener, for tuning into our humble podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button. And if possible, leave us a review of our podcast, because not only does it help our show, of course, but it helps spread the word on all of the wonderful guests we've had on our show. So this is the Born Too Late podcast, signing off.